Hi, and welcome to the Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Izabella Wentz, and I'm so excited to have you here today with me. We're going to be talking about lung rejuvenation, healing allergies, asthma, post COVID wildfires, mold, and so much more. I'm joined today by one of my favorite people, special guest nutritionist, Christa Orecchio. Welcome, Christa. So glad to have you here.
Thank you, friend. I'm happy to be here.
I'm going to share a little bit about Christa. For those of you that might not know her, she's been a longtime collaborator of mine, and she is a clinical and holistic nutritionist for 18 years now. She helps individuals use food as medicine to heal from the root cause and specializes in digestive and hormonal health with her cutting edge online programs. She and her team have taken tens of thousands through her paid programs with astounding success and have had the privilege to help millions more in a meaningful way with their free content. Christa is also the best-selling author of How to Conceive Naturally and Have a Healthy Pregnancy After 30, a sought-after speaker, and the host of 3 health and wellness TV shows. I'm so glad to have you here. I always like to ask everybody that comes on my show, just to get a little bit of context and perspective. How did you get started in food as medicine?
Yeah, it's kind of twofold. So the clinical answer is I had the worst case of candida that I think anyone's ever seen, and no one could help me. I mean, it really kind of took down my high school years. I would be tired. I'd come home after school when everyone else was doing sports, and I just want to eat carbs and candy and pretzels and those kinds of things. I had trouble sleeping. I had insomnia and constipation, and I just didn't feel great. Probably really low cellular energy. I would never have understood that at that time. And I affectionately say, and I'm from New Jersey, and my dad was in the pharmaceutical business, that I was raised on pizza, pasta, and antibiotics. And nobody knew to repopulate gut health or address gut health. And so that's kind of how I lost maybe 10 years of high quality life. And I went on this kind of crusade to figure out, okay, what is this? And all the doctors told me I'm healthy and I'm normal and that doesn't exist. Maybe in my culture it exists, but it doesn't. And finally figured out a process to, systematically overcome it. And that was super inspiring for me. And then in my 20s, after college, I took a year off to backpack the world to find myself. And I really wanted to help contribute to peace. And I was going to go back and get a master's in peace and conflict resolution, and ended up taking like a life-changing workshop by Patrick Holford, who runs the Brain Bio Institute in the UK, called Optimal Nutrition for the Mind. And it blew me away. I mean, he's bringing catatonic schizophrenics back with mass doses of niacin. And I'm like, can food and nutrition do this? And I changed everything about my own health and nutrition and had this profoundly different experience of life on all levels. And I thought, I'm not good. This is how you contribute peace and conflict resolution within the individual first, and help them feel good in their bodies, help them self-actualize. And that's how we contribute to the world. And so it was the confluence of those things that came together. And I said, this is my life's work.
Mm. This is so beautiful. You've helped so many people and you've worked with people on gut health, on adrenal health, and this has been largely my focus too. And I'm a trained pharmacist. My eyes really started opening up from a mental health perspective as well when I was on clinical rotations and I saw high dose nutrients used for schizophrenia and other kinds of mental health disorders. When I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, I was sort of like, is there anything that I can do to make myself feel better? And of course, I was thankfully able to get myself into remission, partially with nutrition and food as medicine and functional medicine. And once I sort of woke up to it doesn't have to be this way, it's not just medications that treat things. I really started to open my eyes to other health conditions. My mom has asthma and she's had it since I was a teenager. I had this lovely cat named Frisbee, and all of a sudden, my mom became super allergic to cats and Frisbee, and we had to put Frisbee in a home. She literally went to a nursing home and she provided so much joy to the nursing home residents, right? And my mom had needed to take a lot of different medications to keep her asthma in check. And so once I started making some lifestyle changes for myself, I started working with my mom on utilizing some of those same lifestyle changes. And holy cow, her asthma improved. Now, my husband's family has a history of asthma, and we have it on my side of the family. So I'm just really, really grateful that you are focusing on lung health because I have been looking for books, I've been looking for resources out there for asthma and lung health. And pretty much, all I've done is just utilize some of the same things I would do for Hashimoto's
Yeah.
for asthma, and they seem to help. But I really am excited to speak to you about some of the things that you've uncovered lately.
Well, yeah, you're arresting the inflammatory process, right? And that's going to affect all aspects of health. And 42 million people in the US struggle with asthma, and we don't really need to.
And I mean, we've got asthma, we've got allergies, we've got like post COVID lung disease, we've got so many different things like wildfires. All of these things really impact our lung health. And it doesn't have to be like permanent, right? So, can we talk about that? Is it possible to improve lung health and function?
Yes, it's 100% possible, but it's necessary for every human that breathes because of what is happening. This is just modern day living, right? And so you mentioned, there's this we've got, the obvious if you smoke or you are an ex-smoker, but that doesn't just mean tobacco, it also means hemp. Like you have to do a lung rejuvenation program. Like stopping smoking isn't enough for the lungs to just self-heal and cleanse from the damage.
Yeah, and I mean all of the vaping these days too. A lot of times people think that's safer than smoking, but that can lead to lung disease as well. I mean, it's like people don't see the harm in it because there's no like actual.
Secondhand smoke and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's really important. We've got our air quality, and I'm saying now it's both indoor and outdoor air quality, right? Because we think about all the things in our house that has flame retardant on it and all the furniture and what's in formaldehyde and our carpets and our couches. And I mean, hopefully we're buying organic pajamas for our littles because there's flame retardant in them if not, right? And this is half their life that they're sleeping in them. And, breathing that in, and just not to mention where we'll have just viruses and mold and bacteria just floating around within the house. And I mean, I know you have a Jasper, I have a Jasper air filter, and cooking is, I'm sure you guys see when you cook, like you start to see that come up. It's like we're just exposed to so much, within our homes, and we've been on quite the rodeo with mold. You have, I have, you've helped me recently. Thank you so much. And it's insidious, and it's in so many different buildings and structures and Airbnbs, and the more dysregulated your nervous system is, the more compromised your immune system is, the more this is going to really stack up. I mean, mold is just such an insidious problem that many people will just feel like 50% of themselves, 30% of themselves for years and never know it. So that's just the number one thing we would want everyone to get to test for, right? And then the outdoor air quality has unfortunately become less than ideal. And then you mentioned wildfires, and then the LA fires are just something completely on the next level because they're not wildfires, right? You are burning up chemicals, you are burning buildings. It's not just a forest fire. You are so many electronics and plastics and carcinogenic chemicals just blanketing that city. And so that's every single. We won't know the effects of what people were breathing in there for probably a decade. And this is so important for everyone and anyone exposed to do a lung rejuvenation program, because the lungs are not just, no part of the body isolates, right? The lungs affect, 5 primary other systems in the body, and really like whole body health. So, and then what else with air pollution? I mean, I'm passionate, about soil health, but like when that brings up herbicides and pesticides. And, a lot of healthy people watching your podcast, we're not, you and I, right? You tested me actually for glyphosate like last year and it was in my urine. I'm not consuming, foods or beverages with glyphosate. Where is this coming from?
You eat all organic. You eat better than I do. Like you come to my house and I hide all of my non-organic things.
I love it. I love it. Except for Halloween this year. But, um, what was I going to say? Oh, so yeah, it's in our urine. And so these herbicides, like when we moved here, I was taking Austin, my son, for horseback riding lessons way out in Hudson Bend, right? And I'm like, the fresh air, And I look across the street and there's a guy spraying glyphosate on his lawn. I'm like, you can't get away from it. And right before that, we moved from California and we're on the beach, my dog, my son and I, and a plane, a helicopter comes out of nowhere, literally 200 feet above our head, starts dumping chemicals into the lagoon. Everyone's like running. Felt like Armageddon. We're running off the beach. Like, what are you doing? Seeing people spraying on the freeways. I mean, so I'm passionate about it. It's cancer causing. It's found in kids. They're spraying it in parks and we're breathing it in. We're getting it, if you're running around the park through your feet. There's metals coming down through the air, through chemical trails, and there's just so much that we're contending with. And nanoplastics, those are coming in through the air, and it's just like there's microplastics, and then there's nanoplastics, and microplastics are under 5 micrometers, nanoplastics under 1 micrometer, and so there's a lot that we're contending with, but natural medicine, natural health, all of these remedies, like there's almost nothing that it can't handle.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for getting into all of that. I know from my experience in working with people with asthma, things like salicylate toxicity, sometimes we can detox it with glycine, and that can help heal asthma. And people get rid of their asthma symptoms. Dairy elimination, cleaning up the personal care routine, or just like some of the cleaning products, all the bleaches and all the harsh chemicals that we use for cleaning. That's a really helpful thing for people with breathing issues, asthma. Protozoal infections, certain ones, parasitic infections, all of these can set off the immune system. They can contribute to asthma breathing issues. There's glutathione we can do, especially inhaled glutathione or N-acetylcysteine. These are all things that can be very helpful for lung health. So I think a lot of people have heard of some of the things that I just mentioned, but I was hoping we can get deeper into salicylates, what they are.
Yeah, they're organic. Salicylates are organic compounds, and they can dramatically affect the inflammatory process within the nasal passages, within the sinuses. And so I think a lot of people don't know that foods that we generally think are healthy can be high in salicylates. And so dried fruits, and I don't know if this helped your mom or Michael, but it's like really getting rid of the dried fruits for a while. And that means like from raisins to dates to prunes to apricots and some foods that people conceive as really healthy, plums and strawberries and apples. There's bay leaves, tomatoes, cucumbers can be high in salicylates. And so really kind of, if you have asthma, taking a look at that list of foods and then maybe choosing others for a while you're healing. And I don't know if you've ever tried this, but I've had great success with 1/8 of a teaspoon of Himalayan pink salt under the tongue before bed to help really mitigate asthmatic symptoms. And like over time, within 6 weeks, there's like 50% reduction. And then also using a salt inhaler to decrease the mucous membranes.
I love that. With the salt, actually in Poland, they would send people with asthma to spend time in salt mines to really get that lung healing and asthma healing. And they would also be helpful for healing skin issues, all kinds of allergic issues. I know I just went to a place like that recently. So they try to like recreate that environment, and they have spas where it's made out of salt, and there's so much you're almost like on a beach of salt, and you're sitting in a room and inhaling that really great salt.
Did you go to the Austin Salt Room?
I did.
I
Yes.
love it. I'm going to be
Yes.
there next week. You liked it?
I liked it. Yeah, it was very relaxing. It was much more relaxing than I thought. We went there for a day date with my husband once.
Oh, I love
We really
it.
enjoyed it.
I think you can do play dates there. It's very regulating for kids too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Any kids with asthma and eczema, this is like a really great place to take them for play dates. One thing I did learn the hard way myself is I sort of induced asthma in myself, and I've had a family history of it. So it's always been on my radar. And all of a sudden, I turned 40 and I'm having all of these issues with breathing. And what I had been doing prior to that is I sprained my foot and I was rubbing peppermint essential oils and all kinds of, natural salicylates. And I ended up having like salicylate toxicity. I feel like people oftentimes they might know aspirin's a salicylate, but there's like natural substances.
Right. And you think you can't go wrong. It's so good. And of course, you would put that together, being such a root cause person. So, yeah, right. Peppermint tea is high in salicylates. And so, if you're using peppermint essential oil, yeah, coffee, oh, it's high in salicylates, wine, beer.
You can really overdo it. One of the tests I really like is the organic acid test because that can tell us our salicylate levels. If that's something that somebody might be wondering about, typically if they have like nasal polyps or if they have aspirin allergies, that might be something that might be relevant for some people.
That's wonderful.
Now, we've covered a lot of different causes, but we haven't covered them all, have we?
Yeah, there's so many of them. So we covered indoor air pollution, outdoor air pollution, herbicides and pesticides, antibiotics. As you know, they can be life saving, but also we have to do our due diligence. And a lot of times, the antibiotics will have lingering effects. Where we didn't get everything from the lungs, not able to have a healthy lung microbiome after we take them, and then a history of infections. Conversely, especially bronchitis and pneumonia are going to leave like in gut thrive as we're going through and we're clearing out the gut microbiome, and we're finding all through all these tissues and these linings and the lining, we're getting these entrenched species, right? And so the lungs are really not that much different, where these lingering infections, yes, they go away and we get better, but why do they come back? Like, why do the lungs become our weak spot, right? And it's because we have these entrenched species that we've never actually fully turned over to like heal the lining and the integrity of the lungs and to rejuvenate cell function. And it's not like within the gut, it's the mucosal lining. Like here, it's the alveoli, it's the lung sacs that provide the gaseous exchange that we want to make sure and help them do the best that they can. Um, yeah, so I'm thinking, okay, what else is going to be affecting the lungs is just, I mean, there's COVID has become kind of a primary one, long haul COVID. And, we're finding like when we do some testing, like you'll have just the latent infection. And so that again is to, if you have long haul COVID or you've had COVID more than one time, and like many of us have at this point, to really rejuvenate the lungs is going to be a huge thing to do.
What about repressed emotions?
Thank you. So the lungs store grief. And in our lung rejuvenation program, we have a grief component, and we did a beta of this last year. And we're using 5 different homeopathy blends to be able to help release stored emotion and emotional trauma. And this is something you and I have talked about a lot, just personally. And so I just don't think the more I've dove into emotional trauma, unexpressed emotional trauma in my own life and grief, and just reading books like the Grief Recovery Handbook. Like in the West, we are not taught how to grieve. We are just taught to set it and forget it. And so a lot of us have all these stacked up things that we've never grieved, small and large. And that can be stored in the lungs. And sometimes men more than women, I can speak to my dad with a history of bronchitis or pneumonia. It's like the lungs is that genetic weak spot. And definitely a lot of men, of that generation aren't able to process, feel emotions, or even know how to. So that's something that's really important. And so much do our emotions affect our health just tremendously.
Yeah, interestingly, I remember seeing a study that was done in women who had gone through abusive marriages, and many of them actually had higher rates of asthma.
Yeah.
And it's just our body, it's just we can't put one part of us in a vacuum.
You can't, yeah. Or, and even if it's not asthma, it could be trouble breathing. So when I think about our beta, we had people trouble breathing upon exertion, to shallow breathing, or, maybe the lungs just become the weak spot. You get that chronic cough that lasts a month. For me, when I was going through a similar situation after an abusive marriage and in a very stressful custody court hearing for a year, and I started to get this cough that wouldn't go away. This was before COVID, and then COVID comes, and so it's just we can't separate the mind from the body, from the emotions, from our experiences.
Yeah, yeah. I'm so sorry that you went through that. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah, and I think as long as we're willing to be open and vulnerable and share and heal from it, then we use it as compost to help others.
One kind of random thing, and it's sort of related, not necessarily on the same page, but I had this chronic cough and I didn't know what was causing it. I ended up figuring out it was food sensitivities after a while. That went away. And then I got into functional medicine and I was working on a documentary project many, many years ago. And I had a lot of conflict with somebody that I was working with, but I was trying to be very polite. I was trying to be very nice and just not really expressing my frustrations or expressing my challenges. And I developed a chronic cough.
Yeah, we're repressing. Yes, whenever we repress our feelings, our anger, our emotions, it's so good that we're talking about this and bringing it up, and especially as women too,
Yeah.
right? We need to be able to speak our truth and set boundaries with kindness, but set boundaries, right? And I remember you going through that. And I remember the health challenges that came for both of you from that, right? Stress is connected to so much, so much.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it actually, I did functional medicine testing and food sensitivity testing. Nothing came up until I started really speaking my truth and getting it out there. And I think that's very relevant for women with thyroid issues too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. So that should be a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah, we could really get into so many different things. We're going to come back to the lungs a little bit because I feel like when you don't have great lung function, when you're not breathing well, this could really impact your whole system.
Of course.
Can we get into some of the consequences of lung function?
Well, poor lung function affects like every part of our bodies. It's breathing, but like primarily, of course, it's going to affect the brain, right? If you're not oxygenating the brain, there are studies that showed early onset Alzheimer's, dementia, cognitive impairment, hippocampal impairment primarily. So the hippocampus, the memory center of the brain, and just a higher increase in neuroinflammation. I mean, I will tell you, I experienced that firsthand. And when I went through I could never understand with all of the people that I've worked with who've had mold, the level of mold that I had, and just from breathing it in, the level of neuroinflammation. I told you, I thought I was getting early dementia. I was like lost in the grocery store, and just like what that can do, right? With when you're inhaling things. So it absolutely cannot be underestimated, the power of the lungs to affect the brain. And on a really kind of minimal scale, which still completely affects our functioning, is brain fog, right? It's gonna create brain fog, and it's impairing which we'll talk about. It's impairing mitochondrial function, and carnitine is excellent for that. But it affects the heart tremendously. So if our lungs aren't healthy, that can lead to early heart failure. That can lead to a whole number of diseases, because you're forcing the heart to work so much harder and pump so much harder, right, to get oxygen throughout your body. And it's just like anything, like you can't separate the human body. If anyone on the team, whether you're playing baseball or soccer, if anyone is running with a broken leg or batting with a broken arm, it's going to affect everybody else on the team, and they're going to have to work harder to make up for that. And of course, the immune system, right? Because if we're going to be breathing in and we're taking in the lungs, their job is like to be that defense against these pathogens that we're bringing in. And if they can't handle it, right, now the immune system has to come in and work much harder than it otherwise would have to work. the muscles, right? They're not able to convert energy. So, of course, we're going to get muscle weakness and we're not going to feel great and we're not going to have a ton of energy. So, it affects really just every aspect of our health and also detoxification. There are only three ways to detox: through the lungs, through the skin, and through the bowels. And it's in this day and age, we have to be eliminating 2.2 pounds of toxins every day. And most of us are not doing that through the bowels. And most of us are not sitting in a sauna, on the regular basis. But breathing is something that's available to everyone that you can do. It's easy and it's free. And just honestly, just making deep breathing part of your daily routine is life changing. I just started my regimen. Today was my third day in a row, getting up at 6 a.m. to do sun sals and two different breathing exercises.
That's amazing. Interestingly, a while back, I learned about using deep breathing for autoimmune disease and Hashimoto's. And I've had a few people, including healthcare practitioners, that utilized like just breath work and breathing and just really focusing in on their lungs to get Hashimoto's into remission. And I just find that fascinating how the body's just so connected.
Yeah. Well, and also for mold. I think when I was healing from mold, you recommended someone for me, and I'll say the neuroinflammation like brings up all these sort of traumas, and it's just the way it affects your breathing creates all this anxiety. And so I would one thing that moved the needle is I would go to transformational breath class 3 times a week. Finally start to feel some sense of regulation, after that. So I can see where it affects everything, and autoimmunity, especially because it's not that we're attacking ourselves, our body's attacking itself. The body's speaking to us like it needs support, it needs release, it needs parasympathetic dominance.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about parasympathetic dominance?
Yeah. So when we're talking about our nervous system, and we always hear about fight or flight, a lot of times I think it's really important we don't hear about freeze or fawn.
Yes.
And when you have trauma, and a lot of us with unhealed trauma, I'm just diving really deep into it now, like you tend to live in the world. Like it's like this coating cloud bubble over the world you live in for years, where your natural response is, do I fight this? Do I flight this? Do I freeze? And I just go through functional freeze, going through the motions, but my body's there and my mind isn't. Or do I fawn, which could be like people pleasing, right? And any one of those states, a lot of times we don't think it because we're like, oh, I'm just relaxed, but you're not. You're in functional freeze, right? Is you're in sympathetic dominance, that fight or flight, and that is doing damage to the nervous system, to the myelin sheath, that protective coating over our nerves. Now you're not converting your food into fuel. Now you're making your adrenals go overtime, and the adrenals and the thyroid we know are a team. So now it's like, okay, let's shut down metabolic processes, right? Because we're in fight or flight, and you end up with all number of diseases and disorders, and from infertility to thyroid problems to horrible perimenopause symptoms or menopause symptoms. You really name it. And I think that the name of the game to live a healthy life is to get yourself into parasympathetic dominance, which is rest, digest, and heal. Where, so what? I have 50 emails. I'm not being chased by a lion, and that the body doesn't know the difference. And so, really being able to convert your food into fuel, and instead of having to load up on an infinite amount of supplements and constantly chasing your tail and running the lab work, it's like, let your body heal itself. Give it the food that it needs to easily convert into fuel, right? Because we know that if we're living in sympathetic dominance, we're going to shut down the gut. Like the nervous system's the foundation of the house. Then we start to go into fight or flight. Then the enteric nervous system in the gut starts to wave its red flag, and whatever we're eating is going to sit like a rock in our stomach. And so we really need to focus on eating, low inflammatory metabolic foods, which means that foods that easily convert into fuel without the body having to work too hard to use them. They shut off the stress response. And I like to basically start people out with the right amount of proteins, carbs, and fats, typically a 50-25-25 if they're in super sympathetic dominance, to shut off that cascade of 60 different types of adrenaline and cortisol, which that will damage the brain more than anything else, right? The prefrontal cortex, executive function, the amygdala. It'll increase it. The longer we live in fight or flight, the bigger our amygdala gets. The longer we live in fight or flight, the smaller our memory center, the hippocampus gets, and then eventually damages the prefrontal cortex responsible for executive function. So I'm passionate, definitely passionate about this topic, and yeah, and then you want to feed the thyroid without the thyroid having to do anything, right?
There's so many different places we could get into. So everything that you shared has been so powerful and so life-changing, and I really appreciate you. I know when I went through my own struggles with adrenal dysfunction and crashing, I had only heard about like fight or flight, right? And that whole functional freeze, that is pretty much when you look at the symptoms, they overlap with hypothyroidism so much. It's all of that fatigue and poor decision making and brain fog, and everything seems like a struggle.
Yeah,
And
just existing is hard.
yeah,
And I know that feeling well, and depression, and just the whole number of things. And I think, trauma wasn't a huge conversation in our industry when we started. And it really is becoming now. And I love Gabor Mate's work and Peter Levine's work. And I've recently worked with somatic experiencing, and I really can't, recommend it highly enough. It's like healing trauma guided by the body. And there's the book, The Body Keeps Score. And so what we're storing every time we go into that, like, functional freeze is when anything happens that is a shock feeling that the body and the mind cannot integrate in the moment. You'll get shocked and stored for later. And you start stacking up those experiences without unpacking them. And then it leads to functional freeze. So,
it's interesting. My husband and I were just having a conversation the other day. And when I lived in Boulder many years ago, a couple of things that I started doing were EMDR and neurofeedback just to really rebalance my nervous system. Because I feel like a lot of us that have autoimmune disease or go through that, a lot of us are in that sympathetic dominant state and we kind of just burn ourselves out. And I had met a healer who talked about this, and she was mentioning, oh, well, you focus on all this nutrition, but I find a lot of people with autoimmunity, they have so much trauma and the conversations they have with themselves aren't so kind. And it was interesting from my perspective going through a lot of the trauma work. It helped me to become more grounded, and it really helped me in life. For example, I would be less reactive if somebody said something insulting to me or that I perceived as insulting, or if I did something that I thought should be embarrassed by, like that would really hold me back for days or sometimes weeks. I would beat myself up over it or just feel terrible about myself. And it was like this whole external thing that trauma work and neurofeedback helped me with. But then hearing my husband's perspective was like, you really transformed as a person. And I was able to like really look up to you when he's a little bit older than me. And I was not the most mature person when we met. So I think I was 22 and he was, 25. And he talked about how that just really transformed me and made me a much better partner and a very grounded mother and able to show up in the world in a totally different way for the people that I love and the people in my life, where I hadn't really noticed that. I just knew that I felt better, right? I didn't realize how much my own trauma was affecting everybody else around me. And I think when, I saw this quote and it's like, when we don't heal what wounded us, we bleed on everybody else, right?
uh-huh. And I'm going through just a deep dive of that, as in my personal life. And it's like, yeah, if we don't heal, we bleed on everyone else. Or the saying, hurt people hurt people. But we're completely not self-aware to that. But then conversely, one of my yoga, I have deep roots in yoga, Paramahansa Yogananda, who brought yoga to the West, he says, heal yourself and you heal thousands, right? Because your energy, your vibration, and I have so much respect for you for doing that, and so much respect for how you walk your talk. And like you said with autoimmune disease, it's the conversation of neuroplasticity as well. And so when you say the way that we talk to ourselves, right, that this is a whole nother podcast, but this is internal family systems from childhood. This is, this is where cognitive behavioral therapy can help. And like, we need to create new neural pathways in the brain, and we need to start to change that internal dialogue. But also when you've been running in a loop for however many decades, right, you're changing now. So doing the neurofeedback, you're changing so much. And thank you. Let me borrow your neurooptimal machine, which I can speak to whenever I would, with the mold, get stuck in this loop. And it was just fear and panic in the middle of the night. And then I would do the neurooptimal. And then all of a sudden I start going back into parasympathetic dominance, and I can fall back asleep and I feel calm again. And so, it truly is root cause. It's changed the way that we think and dial down trauma and not live from it. I mean, I think about everything going on in the world, and really, like, it's all just a projection of what's happening inside of us. And you look at anything from criminals to mental institutions, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, it's all trauma, right?
Yeah.
It's all trauma. And so we need to be helping everybody to understand that and to dial it down within themselves. We'd have a completely different world. It should be covered on all insurance panels and free, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like there are things, we can get into the insurance world and how not helpful it is, right? What insurance companies have brought me trauma just to being a member of their plans for a lot of the issues they've given
I
me.
mean, I think the CEO of United, right? What happened there? It's people get really upset that they have to decide these life or death situations. It's really difficult.
But I think it's these conversations like we're having. I find, yes, you have your insurance and you have your conventional medicine treatments that are covered by insurance. And you know what? I do not want any homeopathy if I'm in a car accident. Please don't give me any homeopathy. Take me to the emergency room. If I need to have an arm stitched back on, please do not give me any supplements.
It can change biology in a matter of seconds in a way that, our field can't do. We need both. We just need a better bridge with respect that goes both ways.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's where what you do really comes into play for, maybe people that have gone to their doctors and that have said, "Hey, I have asthma. Is there anything else I can do?" And they're like, "Here's your inhaler." Or they might have lung disease or exposure, and they just don't get a lot of resources.
They're not getting support, or then you're going to breathe in the corticosteroids. You're going to be on that for a long term. What is that going to do to your immune system? What's that going to do to your adrenals over time, right? And so it's like we just want to stop robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah, I agree. So what are some of the things that people can do from a holistic standpoint when they're in that, I think that space of that's oftentimes ignored. And, we're having these conversations to help people empower themselves so they could take charge of their own health because they're not going to go to a 15-minute appointment with their primary care doctor. Their primary care doctor is not going to talk to them about any of these ways to really help themselves when they have chronic health conditions, right? Urgent care, yes, that can be very, very helpful. You're having an asthma attack or you're just really in an emergent situation. Yes, conventional medicine can help you out, but what do we do? And who are the people that I feel like can be helped the most by these recommendations?
Okay, well, so I can speak to our beta where we really wanted to help people with chronic lung issues. So we've got asthma, we've got wheezing, we've got a history of mold, we've got long haul COVID, history of bronchitis, history of pneumonia, just general lungs are the weak spot, grief, a lot of sleep issues. 70% of our beta group started sleeping better. 88% had more energy after rejuvenating their lungs. And definitely, long COVID or if you've been exposed. And so I think especially if you're a firefighter, right, you've got to do this once a year or you're constantly exposed like that. Farmers, unfortunately, it's just being proactive, just like you would do a gut cleanse, just like you would do a soup cleanse. Like doing a lung cleanse and a lung rejuvenation is going to really start with this gentle overturning of the cellular process to start to cleanse. And you mentioned glutathione, and nebulizing glutathione is great. And so we're really working, I found, at obviously at the genetic level you get the most benefit, right? And so we're working with herbs and under the threshold, and maybe you use lungwort, which is just beautiful, like huge studies on lungwort and asthma of how it can work. And when you combine that with DNA factors and RNA factors, now you're changing gene expression at the same time. You're not it's it's teaching a man how to fish instead of giving a man a fish. So it's root cause healing. And now, from everybody we've surveyed, 100% of people, coughing and wheezing is better. Long haul COVID symptoms are better. Their asthma is better. And this is 4 months after, and we're still tracking them, right? Because we're training and we're gently overturning what's happening within the lungs and improving that cellular integrity, and then adding in things that will boost mitochondria, right? And so adding in the CoQ10 and the L-carnitine, and using foods that are going to suspend the inflammatory process, but also that are high in vitamin A and vitamin E and potassium, and things that are going to really start to improve lung function and lung quality, and postbiotics, and do this systematic process that now overturns it and trains it, but not just through, right? So we're using these really like small batch, high quality herbs under the threshold. And we're not just cleansing, and then we're not just rejuvenating, but you're using really specific breathing techniques. Like that's going to be important. And self-care, like I love Ayurveda. I've just started my panchakarma. I'll have to share that with you. But they use supernasya oil. It's an oil to coat and heal the lining inside the nose, and also will help with sleep. Like I use it before I fly, so that I won't, without a mask, I won't, if people are sick, you're not going to be breathing it in. 2 drops of that at night. We're just doing different self-care processes, and castor oil packs can be helpful, deep breathing. And then I'm going to add in more like targeted grief work, like maybe like an EFT, emotional freedom technique or something. 50% of people who had stuck grief had improvement. And I'm not good with a 50%. I'd like to see it higher, and it wasn't an enormous focus. But yeah, so you're really starting to blend all of these things together. You're blending in herbal formulas and vitamins and minerals, and we're gonna enhance ATP. We're gonna help with like a cellular apoptosis, a programmed cell death. Like help the body to start to know how to do that better, is going to be really important.
I love that. I'm looking at the stats that you sent me. And so I had chronic cough for years, and I was at the point where I was ready to cut off my head to get rid of the chronic cough.
I know. Can't function anymore. I mean, I've had it too, and I'm sure a lot of people watching have had it.
You have 100% success rate in your beta group with chronic cough. Like, I so wish you would have had this program many years ago, and I could have taken it because it took me like 3 years to try to figure out on my own.
Me too. Well, longer. It started with the grief in 2019. Every time I'd get sick, and then mold, it's like, I'm going to cough. I'm like, I swear I'm not sick anymore. I'm just coughing for months on end, right? And so there's so many people struggling with that. And yeah, I'm grateful. Dr. Jack Tips, who is my clinical partner in this work and in this program, and he's just brilliant. And we partnered on rejuvenating the gut microbiome with astounding success. And this is just kind of the next evolution. And it used to be where I'm like, oh, I think it's enough, because if you can rejuvenate the gut microbiome, it's going to replicate it to the other 6 microbiomes. And it is absolutely not enough anymore. You have to focus on the lung gut axis. Like no one's really talking so much about that. But the lungs too, they're also not going to replicate to other parts.
Yep.
So it's a kind of a concentrated microbiome.
It's their own microbiome in the lungs and the sinuses. What I learned about mold exposure, mold, you can live in a moldy home and you can leave, but the mold can colonize your sinuses, it could colonize your lungs, and you can become the mold factory
Yes.
and you can keep yourself sick. One big red flag I see for people with mold exposure and sometimes dairy sensitivity is sinus issues. In your beta, you had 62% of people with sinus challenges before the program, and 80% had improvement or resolution.
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah.
impressive.
Well, we did talk about the salicylates and like going low inflammation. And I think the supernacia oil and the breathing really helps. But when you're kind of systematically taking these, there's maybe like 25 different under the threshold herbs when you're mixing that with RNA and DNA factors, and then we're adding in like homeopathy for stuck grief or for shock, or we're adding that in too, and it's all really working well, and it's like shrinking up those mucosal membranes, and of course the diet, we know dairy increases the mucosal membranes. So yeah, sinuses, we still want to work on that more, but and unhealed pathogens, I have found that, let's say you've had strep a number of times in your childhood that you didn't complete the immune cycle necessarily. And so that can be a cause of chronic sinusitis.
So I have to say, as a pharmacist, was always very skeptical of homeopathy, and it was just always like, I don't know, are these just sugar pills?
Yeah,
And
they
it
taste like sugar
they
pills.
taste like sugar pills. They look like sugar pills, right? And then it took my son having croup, and his pediatrician gave him a homeopathic remedy, and he goes, "This works better than steroids."
Yeah,
And it did.
yeah,
And I'm like, these are tiny little white, like sugar pills.
yeah.
But I feel like if you have the right remedy for the right symptom, it actually does work. And I was very skeptical about this for a long time. Can you speak more to homeopathy and your experience with it?
I love homeopathy, and you should do a whole show on that. It's so an interview of some brilliant homeopaths that, I mean, and I'm going to butcher it because I'm not a homeopath, but if they were to say it's kind of like that micro dose, and they hate when you compare it to a vaccine, right? Because it's not, but it's like, giving something. So, for example, for hypermental activity that prevents sleep, the remedy is cafe accruta, where they take like a microscopic amount, like that actually comes from coffee. So it's like you're treating the issue with the cause. It's a really fascinating, and that's when you're working like systematically. And I've been using homeopathy since my son was born. I mean, lead him for bug bites and all of that holistic first aid, and arnica and aconite for a shock. They like, I remember when Dimitri was over for Austin's 5th birthday party, and he bonked his head in the kitchen island.
You're like,
And
I
I
got
said,
the arnica.
yeah, and the aconite. I'm like, okay, he's shocked from that experience. And so I can't love it anymore. And one of my best friends, Willow Buckley, is a brilliant homeopath, as is Jack. And we co-authored our book together. And during my labor and delivery, she's giving me homeopathy, and afterwards to help with so many things. And you can't take so many things when you're pregnant, right? But you can take homeopathy for almost anything. And when Austin, he had 104 fever, last week. So I was like, I don't know if I'm super prepared for this interview. He was sick all week, and I'm using ferrum phos, and it helped to break the fever. It's just so powerful.
So fascinating. There's just so many different healing modalities out there. And I love how you pull on quite a few of them inside of the program. So you've got herbs, you've got nutrition, you've got homeopathy, you've got breath work, you've got trauma work. And I think a lot of times people expect like one pill for every ill.
Yeah.
And that's what, pharmaceutical industry is based on, but it's really not that simple. Like if you have a condition that developed, like a chronic health condition, there's probably a lot of different contributing factors that led you to develop that. And I love that you You go through a lot of them. So I'm familiar with using NAC and glutathione. I think a lot of people are aware that these are great for lung health. What are your other go-tos that perhaps you can share with us?
Well, we mentioned lungwort. I love it so much. It goes back to the Middle Ages, and its official plant name is Pulmonaria officinalis, right? And they named it that because the actual leaf looks like a diseased lung. And I feel like nature is always giving us the clues. And when we think back, there's a 16th century physician who coined the doctrine of signatures, which means like nature's giving us the clues. So something looks is how it interacts in the body, like a walnut's high in omega 3s, and omega 3 fatty acids support the brain. The avocado looks like the uterus, and it supports reproductive health. The I also love lotus root. We're using that within the program, and it resembles the bronchioles of the lungs, right? And it supports lung integrity. Tomatoes, the chambers of the heart. Grapefruit, the tissues of the breast, right? To clear out the lymphatic system there. So we love using lungwort and golden seal, which I've been working with for so long now. I really love it because it's not one of those super heavy hitters. It's a fantastic and very gentle antimicrobial. It's from the berberine family, and great in staph and great in strep, and these factors that contribute to colds and flus, and just really helpful for lung health. And then, postbiotic molecules, those are helping the metabolic processes where I'm talking about your amino acids and your neurotransmitters, right? So things that are going to be supportive, L-tryptophan, we're not thinking that those, and that they're actually going to work off of the live bacteria. We hear of prebiotics, we hear of probiotics, like postbiotics are going to continue doing the job like long afterwards, right? It's like we have the good bacteria in our probiotics, we have the prebiotics that will then feed the good bacteria, but then what is this whole idea of postbiotics to contribute to the longevity of the healing over time? And I think we're getting a lot more lasting effects. Time will tell. We've just tracked for 4 months now because of the use of postbiotics. And then, of course, the things that are really helping with mitochondrial support, from CoQ10 to PQQ is great and great for brain health. And L-carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine, which we talked about. So these are all things that are going to be really helpful and supportive. And like you mentioned, NAC, and then general anti-inflammatory is like your bromelain, right? That's going to be really helpful as a proteolytic and an anti-inflammatory. Boswellia is huge, and I'm sure you've worked with that as just a general, very powerful, like as powerful as NSAIDs. If you're going to take Advil or something like that, Boswellia is amazing.
Amazing anti-inflammatory, works for ulcerative colitis. It can help with shrinking thyroid nodules. Amazing how many of these things have so many benefits. It's not just lung. I didn't know a lot of them could be used for lung health.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're using them systematically, and that's where we're using the lung tissue factors, the DNA and the RNA factors, the lung tissue factors, and then you're combining that specifically, with these herbs. We're excited. I mean, I sent you the results. We're excited at the results we're getting. And that was just from beta, right? So now you can improve. And this is what we do. Then we improve upon it and test it again and do it another time. And then, of course, food as medicine is going to be really important. And that's keeping that, I'd say, your paleo-esque, gluten-free, and just gluten-free and dairy-free, and nightshade free. It's almost like a paleo autoimmune, specifically tailored to the lungs to help your body so it doesn't have to rely on supplements after the first 4 weeks. Or some people need to repeat. Like we're repeating some people now, like to see what kind of results we're getting. Because to your point, we've been doing these things for decades, and so do you think you can be completely healed in a month? Maybe not. And maybe it's going to be something you do once a year, or something like to really get some traction. May need to repeat it. And we're doing that with about 20% of our beta group right now. And so that they can start to take over, let food as medicine take over, like eat your broccoli sprouts, because they're going to train your liver to produce more glutathione, right? And so these types of things, and to help eating foods that are higher in potassium, that are going to help support, reduce fluid retention. It's just taking the burden there's off of other aspects so that the lungs can have a chance to truly thrive.
And another part is you are what you digest, right? And so
Yeah, so that's the group of the 4X, the pancreatin, the group of concentrated pancreatic enzymes, which, they're going to. So I'm talking about amylase, I'm talking about lipase, I'm talking about protease, where they're going to bind to water molecules and then help you digest more of your food so that it can go towards helping all aspects of your body.
I didn't realize that, but I feel like I'm thinking about some of the labs that I've seen in people with breathing issues, and they do tend to have low elastase, which can correlate with pancreatic enzyme deficiency. And so I didn't realize there was such a big connection between lung function and pancreatic enzyme deficiency, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? All of the pathways, which then, helps with sleep. I'll say I took an uncoated pancreatic enzyme with duodenum faithfully for 4 months, and it just improved my sleep so much because of the way that it improved my digestive processes and lowered the inflammation process. And so I think that that's also something that can just be really helpful for people, is to do that once a year.
And that makes so much sense. When we're fat malabsorbing, then we have a harder time to fasting. And when you're sleeping, you're supposed to be fasting because you're not eating, right? And so your body can't properly utilize fats when you're deficient in pancreatic enzymes. So that is fascinating. How do we learn more about you and your work?
You can find me at ChristaOrecchio.com, or Instagram or YouTube. I have a private health club at christashealthclub.com. And then our lung program is lungrejuve.com.
I love that. You're also providing a guide for our community that we're going to put in the show notes. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, this is written by Jack Tips, my clinical partner. I mean, he is just a research maniac. He has hundreds of papers, maybe thousands, probably thousands at this point of 30, 40 years he's put together. And this is an 8-page article on nanoplastics. And like, you will get a super deep dive. There are 48 studies that have put this paper together on nanoplastics, what they are, where they are, how to overcome their toxicity.
I'm so excited about your program and I can't wait to dive into it.
We can all do it together.
That would be really great. I feel like I had a recent respiratory issues and I'm like, I feel like I could really use a lung rejuvenation. I'm in this process right now where I go through like a liver reset every year and just support my detox pathways, and I'll kind of get into like a bone broth. I'm into the bone broth right now, so I'm just really working on my gut health.
You did the bone broth fast, right? The last time we were together, you're doing a bone broth fast. I have so much respect. You take care of your health. You really walk your talk, and you're always focused on whatever it needs to be, whether it's digestion or trauma or brain health or, anything, your immune system.
And yeah, and I feel like we all need to do that because life comes at you fast, right? Like we have all of these seasons in life. You and I have both moved, right, a couple of times in the last few years. And that can be very stressful on our adrenals. So I spend a lot of time in that mode of let's get into the parasympathetic, let's focus on my adrenals. Not as much time like working out, right? And now this is a new season. So I'm like, all right, wait, I've got to get my fitness on board. And I feel like we also need to take care of our body, whether that's like we're going to do a season of brain health or we're going to do a season of liver support. And I love that you've created a lung program that we can all benefit from. I so appreciate you and how you show up in the world and all you do to help others heal. You are such an inspiration to me and I just love you. Thank you for being you, and thank you for being my friend and for being such a beautiful healer for this in this world and the work that you do and the passion that you have.
I love you so much and all of that right back at you. I couldn't have any more respect for you or be more grateful to have you as a good friend.
Oh. Um, Thank you for taking time out of your busy day. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you just a couple of rapid fire questions. What do you wish more people knew about food as medicine?
The power of it. The power of it. It's just so incredible how much power we have. And you've heard this so many times to help ourselves, to heal ourselves, or to hurt ourselves with what's at the end of our fork, really with every bite. And um I've been doing food as medicine before food as medicine was a thing, right? And so it's like we've both seen our moms. Like I saw my mom heal from systemic lupus, which was, incurable and unheard of. And just there's so many things. I think the next question is like, what are these incurable diseases that can be cured with it? And as I was even researching before this, it's a disease of the lungs, is a bronchiectasis, is an inflammatory disease of the lungs where you have the walls, they widen and they expand like through inflammation. And if you're going to go to a pulmonologist, you're going to go, they're going to say, yeah, I'm sorry, this is just, here you go, you got this. This is just something you have to deal with forever. But food is medicine mixed with herbal remedies, mixed with these different things, that we're doing, yes, can heal it. And I think we've been doing this long enough where we've seen so many things. I've had people do proteolytic enzymes and castor oil packs on the breasts, and then they go back to their doctor and their benign tumor's gone, and they're like, how? Right? Or same thing, fibroids, as long as they're like a golf ball or smaller, right? You can dissolve those and process them out through the bowels. And so it's just like really thinking through these things before we start cutting and poking and prodding and medicating.
Thank you so much for joining Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations. I hope this conversation has been truly healing for you and will continue to serve you on your healing journey. Until next time.